accepted this job, and Mike had found me a room to lodge with one of his pals who I'd never met. And I jumped in my Austin Allegro with my windsurfer on the roof and drove down the A1 all the way to Hayling Island with my ghetto blaster on the passenger seat because I had a radio, but you need no kind of tape deck or anything. And I'm rocking up at a place that really I'd never been to with all my worldly goods in a 1 litre Austin Allegro in a mustard brown. He wasn't a babe magnet. Let me tell you.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This is Chatzzz episode 32. Can't believe we've done 32 episodes already. And we've got a very, very special guest today. Anthony Penny, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Adam.
So what we do on all the podcasts is we get the guests introduce yourself to the audience. So if you were to introduce yourself to somebody for the first time, to the viewers, to the listeners, how would you do so?
In a professional capacity. Yeah, I'm self-employed as a hospitality consultant and business coach. So having spent 30 odd years in the 4-star full service hotel industry, I've now decided to go it alone and try and pass on some of that expertise to those maybe not quite as well versed as I am.
Nice. So that should give people a good idea of who you are and what you do. So the other way we start the podcast is we do 3 facts about yourself. So to kind of loosen yourself up a bit and get the viewers and the listeners to know you a bit better. So have you prepared these 3 facts?
Well, yeah, loosely. I would say, probably one of my strongest traits is that I'm fiercely loyal, both in terms of employment and more importantly, family, I think. And you, having worked for me, Adam, you'll know that I'm an advocate of this. Work-life balance is hugely important. And, this since COVID and the lockdown, everybody's realized that there is a life outside of work when they've been sat at home being paid to do nothing. So it isn't something that I'm jumping on the bandwagon with. I probably realized this when my wife, Sarah, and I started a family where, working in the hotel industry, you can be there 24/7. And I just made that decision that you can't buy that time back, and I was going to make sure I was home for my kids. So yeah, I'm as I say, when it comes to family, fiercely defensive.
Yeah. Where do you think that loyalty comes from then?
My childhood. I think I was very privileged growing up, and I know that we're going to talk about that a bit later on. But certainly I think I had, from a working class background, but I had a very stable family upbringing, and I think an awful lot of that has, is reflected in the way that I approach life now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how you say it's important in work and at home, isn't it? But more so in home, because I feel like loyalty is a trait that not that many people have these days.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think maybe like the younger generation or even my generation, I think less and less people do have it. Yeah.
Do you? I think. Perhaps you're right. And I suppose through my time as a general manager, I've managed a number of different properties, and the workforces have all been very, very different. And what I have seen is that people have become less and less committed generally to their everyday work. And certainly the etiquette in recruitment and employment has gone out the window. We've so many examples of people applying for jobs, being offered a job after interview, and then not turning up to work.
It's crazy.
It's just crazy.
I just wonder how people. I don't.
Well, I grew up in the 80s, and from North Yorkshire, and the miners' strike was very prevalent, and unemployment was incredibly high. And you actually, whilst I went to university, but everybody was very pleased to have a job. And certainly, when I went into the world of work, you didn't count your hours because you were happy to get full-time work. So my 40 hours a week were probably done by Thursday morning.
So then the second fact?
I think that I firmly believe that everybody's in charge of their own destiny. And I've always been very self-motivated. if ever you get a knockback, you've got to view that as an opportunity. So yeah, very self-motivated. I've only been made redundant once in my life, which was actually fairly recently, which spurred me on to become self-employed. And you can either look at that kind of setback as a destructive influence in your life and a negative, or you can think, okay, there's not that many people who haven't been made redundant or sacked in some point in their life. Yeah. So what am I going to do about it? And there's really no point in worrying about things that aren't within your control.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
And like you say, if you're self-employed as well, you kind of like know where you are better, don't you? I suppose. I've been made redundant.
I think I've worked for different managing directors, operations directors, chief execs over the year, and they've all had real positive traits, but every single one of them's had negative traits. And what you need to do is absorb the positive stuff and make sure that you never do the negative stuff. Now, I'm sure, and you don't back me up here, Adam, but there'll have been times when you were at North Lakes where you thought, Antony's out of order there. But, I've probably had a reason for doing it. But generally, I think you're in a position to steer the direction of your life. And we'll see as what the future holds in terms of consultancy contracts moving forward. But, it won't be a case of sitting back and wallowing in self-pity if I've got to go 3 months without any work.
Yeah. And the third fact was?
Third fact is one that's probably not related, and something that probably won't be known to an awful lot of people. Is I used to be an incredibly good sailor, and I used to sail for my county in my teens. So I've got my Yorkshire colours, and sailing really, I suppose, throughout my later teens was my life and was the primary influence in my first job. I worked for a windsurfing company because I got into windsurfing off the back of when windsurfing was becoming a boom sport.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was one of those. I didn't actually apply for an advertised position. I wrote to companies that I fancied working for.
Yeah.
To say, hey, this is me and this is what I do. And the fact that I sailed for Yorkshire and that I was joining an industry was in the sort of boom years. Landed me my first role, the lofty position of marketing manager.
Nice.
Yeah, for a paltry £7,000 a year. I thought I was a millionaire.
Yeah, I was going to say at that age you was. But yeah, before we move on to the next section, I was going to say, about the North Lakes thing, of you saying that, you're probably out of order. But I always sing your praises to everyone, that you were like my first proper boss. So I was saying, if anyone was wondering what kind of manager or boss you would be, I would, because you gave me a lot of responsibility at a young age.
Yeah.
And you met me when I was like 19, 20, didn't you?
Yeah.
And like managing the hotel on like shifts and stuff. And I would say that you trusted me to use my instinct of what I think's best. And you'd rather just leave me to it.
Yeah.
And then me come to you with like a solution. And then if that solution wasn't what you maybe would have done, you'd say, well, maybe do that next time and that next time, rather than micromanaging a 19-year-old.
Absolutely. This is honestly, Adam, and this is kind of music to my ears, because micromanagement, I think that I suppose my style has always been about empowering the people that you're employed to do a job.
Yeah.
And the long and short of it, I'll give you an example. I had an operations manager who was very, very good at a job. You know exactly who I mean. I'm not going to name names. Who said, she would go home and stress that the North Lakes was running right without her input. And I'm saying, right, okay, so what you need to do is sit down and think about the salaries involved in your maitre d', your bars manager, your head chef, your sous chef, your spa manager, all these, and then the duty manager that you've left behind. You're way into 150k. Now, if we're paying people £150,000 worth of salary and you can't rest when you go home, we've employed the wrong people.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And you've got to trust people to do the job that they're employed to do. And you're absolutely right. Micromanagement sucks the soul out of employees. It fosters anxiety, and it's actually a really, really destructive force in your business. And whilst I think general managers can naturally be control freaks, you've got to stem that urge.
Yeah.
You've got to. And you're right. Let people make the mistakes, let them learn from the mistakes, and give them the advice to move on.
I think, I always say, like, you're probably the best boss that I ever could have had, and that's kind of helped shape me and my career moving forward. You know what I mean? Thinking that if I'm ever managing like some people, I think that, they're doing their best. If I just advise them, say, oh, well, maybe next time we could improve this or improve that.
Yeah, but absolutely. Yeah. And I think as the older you get, Adam, I think the more you've got to accept that you may have bucket loads of experience, but actually some of these young bucks know an awful lot more than you do.
Yeah.
And, I could give you numerous examples. Hey, listen, I think I'm fairly techie.
Yeah.
I'm not. Whenever I need stuff doing, I give my phone or my laptop to the boys and they sort it out. And that's the point, isn't it? You've got to look at the youth of today and think, well, actually, these guys in their early 20s have got a huge amount of value to add to what you do.
Yeah.
And you could look at the same scenario at one of the places I've been consulting for, Farnham Hall. The team here are really young, but full of vigor and energy and enthusiasm.
Cool. So the way we normally go into the podcast is kind of going back to a young Anthony and what you were like growing up, any like first memories or anything that when you're a bit older now you can reflect on that's really like shaped who you are as a person or how you've developed over the years. So what were you like, say, growing up back in the day?
Feral.
Yeah?
Absolutely feral.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would you say that?
Grew up in a tiny village in North Yorkshire, a place called Hinderwell, which is just north of Whitby, and spent a huge amount of time with my grandmother. Mum was back to work as a teacher, and so grandma would get me to school and look after me after school. So I would say that she was a huge influence on my childhood. Very Victorian values, really Victorian values, and I talk to my boys manners and etiquette that were instilled in us as kids. And they just look at me as if I'm like completely alien. And, it's just simple things like everybody taking their shoes off at the front door before they came into the house. We had to stand up when adults came into the room. You didn't speak unless you were spoken to. Really quiet.
That's quite traditional.
Really strict.
Yeah.
Really strict. But there's nothing wrong with that, And my nan would talk to me about money and the value of money, and you don't buy anything with this hand unless you've got the money in the other hand to pay for it. And then my mortgage is more or less paid off, but that's the only money I owe in the world. Just no way.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Like you say that if you spent so much time with your grandma and she had them the way she was, and you're trying to rub it off to your kids, like it's just generational, isn't it? The way the generation is.
Yeah, and I suppose I don't know. I think my relationship with our boys is different. My mum and dad divorced when I was 10, and I don't keep in touch with my father because I couldn't remember very clearly what went on at that time, whereas my younger sister didn't, and then did rediscover her biological father. And mum remarried, and my stepfather is very much my dad. He's had far more influence on me and my upbringing. But that kind of makes you look at the way you bring your kids up, and we're very, very tactile with our boys. There's a huge amount, it sounds soft, there's a huge amount of love in the house, and I would never ever speak to either of my boys without telling them I love them. And some people might look at that and think, well, that's a bit soft or a bit, but no, it just matters hugely to me. And I suppose I kind of view my boys as my friends. They probably don't think that. They probably think I'm a royal pain in the backside.
Apart when they want money.
That's right. Apart from when they want bailing out. But we do have that kind of relationship, and I think that probably stems back to spending probably more time with my grandmother than I did probably with my mum. And whilst my mum loved it dearly, wasn't as tactile in that loving motherly sense. Very, very protective and providing, but not, I don't ever remember particularly, sitting on her knee while she read me a story.
Yeah, no kind of affection.
Yeah. And it does influence how you then sort of mold yourself in later life. And I think that's probably not just about your home life. I think you take that into your professional life as well.
Would you say then that when you were first starting out, you wanted more, say, like praise and that kind of thing? It's like saying how well you're doing and that kind of thing, or not?
I don't think so, really. I had a really a really happy childhood. And as I said, grew up in a tiny village. We'd have breakfast and then we didn't come back till we were hungry,
Yeah.
and the whole village knew one another, and it was that kind of existence. And that's probably why when we moved back to Cumbria, we moved out into the sticks, because I wanted that for our boys. And I know that right now, that's painful for them because they've got to jump in a car to go anywhere. Whereas I know that when they're in the 30s, they'll be thinking, do you know what? That was actually quite cool.
Yeah, definitely. So when you were growing up then, what did you aspire to be or aspire to do?
Do you know what, Adam? I had no clear direction about where I wanted to end up. And I suspect that's probably a product of being quite happy-go-lucky. Very happy to go with the flow and roll with the punches. I breezed through my O-levels. You won't remember them, the GCSEs now, Adam.
Did you enjoy the academic side then?
I enjoyed school. I had a great time at school. Yeah. But to be honest, in terms of application, and I've put it down as one of my regrets for later on, that a bit like our youngest son, George, our eldest, had to work really hard for everything he's got. Yeah. And he's now in the Northumbria Police and carving a really good career for himself. Our younger one, he's naturally very bright and knows it and doesn't try hard.
Yeah.
And that's a frustration as a parent, because you can, the parents' evenings we've been to where they've said, oh, Joseph's just fantastic. And do you know what? If he really applied himself, he'd fly. And he would come back to me and say, Dad. This was before his GCSEs. He'd say, Usain Bolt doesn't break any world records in the heats, does he? Yeah. My GCSEs are just to get me into my A-levels. And my A-levels are just to get me into uni.
That's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because at the time, I was thinking, GCSEs are the end of the world.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Just need that
not bothered at all. So, yeah, just sort of very, very happy-go-lucky. Went through my O-levels, got 8 O-levels, went into my A-levels, applied the same level of enthusiasm to them, and only just scraped through. And then away to uni, and really and truly, doing business studies at uni was probably a course that would fit many outcomes. So it wasn't that I went to uni with a very fixed end result in mind.
Yeah.
And as such, I ended up working for a windsurfing company.
So with the business, I was going to say, but because I suppose back when you went to university, not everybody went, did they?
No.
And say, doing business studies, like you say, there's no specific career path either. So why business studies, and what appealed to you about that?
I'd done economics as one of my A-levels, and I just felt that would give me a broad grounding to whatever ultimate direction I chose, and it hasn't hindered me in the slightest. Quite the contrary. How much of my course did I actually utilize? I think there's an element of going to university being more useful about life skills than it is about your education.
Yeah, I can agree with that, definitely. Yeah. When I went, I was 18, I didn't have a clue how to cook or clean or wash my clothes.
Well, I went from Whitby to Newcastle, and it was just a complete eye-opener.
I can imagine. Yeah.
It was just like, man, what is going on here?
How would you sum up then university experience?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I didn't, honestly, I didn't get homesick at all.
Yeah.
Not in the slightest. It was just like, right, this is the next chapter, and off you jolly well go. And I absolutely loved Newcastle. What a place to spend 3 years. So, but yeah, it was just about gaining that level of independence, and then I'd got my job, my first job after graduating, sorted out in the February of the year I finished.
That's good.
So I knew where I was going before I'd taken my finals.
It was that good for peace of mind, isn't it? Thinking, all right, I've actually got a job.
Yeah, and I think that maybe stems back to what I was talking about, people being in charge of their own destiny, because it was that self-motivation. I wasn't applying for advertised positions. I was just thinking, well, you know what, in an ideal world, who'd I like to work for? And just write a speculative letter. And I got a handful back, some saying, love your CV and what you're about, but with no positions. And then I got an invitation to go down and work for a sailmaker on Hayling Island down near Portsmouth.
So what was it like then, the first day in a real world job after university?
Do you know what? Going to work for Mountfield Sales was just like going out to play. Because I turned up for interview in a suit, and Mike, the owner of the company picked me up from Havant train station in a pair of surf shorts and t-shirt. And I just felt I don't want to swear.
You can
I
say.
just thought, I've got this badly wrong.
You can never be overdressed.
No,
That situation.
No. And I spent a couple of days down there and stayed with him and his wife, and it was just fantastic. But yeah, first day into work, and it was just, the whole staff were just surf dudes, and you're just walking up in your flip flops and a pair of surf shorts and
It's all right.
and cracking on. And it was just, I don't know, you just kind of take it into your stride. But I accepted this job, and Mike had found me a room to lodge with one of his pals who I'd never met. And I jumped in my Austin Allegro with my windsurfer on the roof and drove down the A1 all the way to Hailing Island with my ghetto blaster on the passenger seat because I had a radio, but you need no kind of tape deck or anything. And I'm rocking up at a place that really I'd never been to. With all my worldly goods in a 1 litre Austin Allegro in a mustard brown. He wasn't a babe magnet. Let me tell you.
Well, I was shocked at that. So then, was it what you expected then when you moved down?
Yeah, it was absolutely what I expected, and I had a couple of years down there. The market for windsurfing, you're into market. You get that boom, and then it declines, and then it levels off, and there were far too many sailmakers in business to meet the demand. And so Mike was then talking about going back into making dinghy sails, which I just really didn't appeal to me in the slightest. So I headed back up north and ultimately ended up taking a part-time job at the North Lakes, which is how I ended up in hospitality.
Yeah, I was going to say then, had you ever considered hospitality before?
No, not in the slightest. I'd had a summer job working in kitchens, doing a bit of kitchen portering, a bit of veg prep, all this kind of stuff. But Christ almighty, no. Yeah. At that time, no, I'd never considered hospitality. But it's one of those. And again, when you talk about making your own luck, I took a job in the bar at the North Lakes. Within 6 months, I was assistant bars manager. Within 12 months, I was bars manager. Within a couple of years, I was onto the assistant management program and got my first general manager's position 9 years into working with the same company. And when you talk about being fiercely loyal, I ended up working for 30 years with Thwaites. And I suppose, again, if you look at regrets, then probably one of my regrets is staying with that company for so long. Because that kind of loyalty now just doesn't exist.
No, definitely
people,
not.
People your age, you're self-employed, Adam, now, but they'll generally stop 2 to 3 years and then they're on to the next thing.
I was going to say, the way I think it kind of works is, like you say, you stay a couple of years, don't you? Then you go to another company to get paid more, and then you jump to another company to get paid more, and that kind of thing. That's why I was saying earlier, I feel like loyalty is never diminishing, like, quality in people.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, I was going to say, so what actually appealed to you about that job at the North Lakes? And was it just the only one that was there in that?
Yeah, initially it was a means to an end, and I just got engaged to Sarah, who's now my wife of 30 odd years, and so the option to move away to find employment wasn't really there. So it was, listen, can I make the most of this? And actually, hospitality is great fun. So the minute you start expanding your knowledge in a property like the North Lakes, where you're exposed to every facet of the business, whether it's food and beverage or whether it's a spa or whether it's sales and marketing and so on and so forth, you never get bored. And one of the things that I loved, I suppose, of my time in hospitality is no 2 days ever the same.
No. So then when you started in the North Lakes and in hospitality, and like you said, you progressed really, really quickly, what qualities do you think that you had to help you progress at such a high speed compared to anybody else that was, say, your peers at the time?
Good question, Adam. I'm not sure. I think
it's a hard question, isn't it? Because you need to big yourself up a bit. There must have been something that set you apart from other people. I
think I'm still very good friends with the guy who founded Shire Hotels, a guy called Ian Harkness, and Ian would say that I displayed every single one of the company's core values, and a lot of it's about people. The whole industry is about people, whether it's customers or staff. And you need to be able to cajole and tickle people along and get the most out of people, or sometimes they're not in a good place to deliver what you need to deliver, or, they might be looking for more money. You haven't got more money to give them, but you can give them motivation in different ways. You can also have some, I think in hospitality, you meet some of the nicest people in the world. You also meet some of the worst. And it's just having that skill set to deal. Like I say, every day is different. And some days you're going to get hit with an angry customer for whatever reason. Sometimes it can be warranted. Sometimes it's completely unwarranted. Yeah. You've still got to deal with it. Yeah. And you've got to deal with it in a satisfactory fashion for both parties. And I suppose I must have that skill. Yeah. Because I've done it for so many years. But equally, I think when you put into situations where, the financial crash of 2008 and 2009, where all businesses were on the backside, it's about having a prudent approach to the way you steer your ship. Yeah. And I suppose the fact that I've remained in that position for as long as I did, I must have been doing it okay.
So then going through the various positions, going from you weren't really that bothered about going into hospitality, did you enjoy the progression? Did you enjoy the more responsibility? Like I say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I worked, I suppose, a hospitality management of big 4-star units has changed fundamentally from my early days, where the whole emphasis was about guest care. Mm-hmm. Whereas now there's a huge amount of time spent managing upwards, having to analyze. I'll give you an example. When I first started out as an assistant manager, we had no idea on a monthly basis what the profit and loss account was going to come in at. When I finished my time in the hotels, I could tell you within 100 quid. Yeah. That's how different it is. But, when I first started out, 70% of your shift was out on the floor. And when I finished, it was probably the other way. It's probably 30%.
Mm. Yeah, that's one thing that when I first started working, I was thinking, general manager, but he's never what does he actually do in his office? But then, when you say you get to know what you actually do, like you say, it's all of the behind the scenes, the numbers and that kind of stuff that you think, if you don't do it, who else is going to do it, isn't it?
That's right.
So it is interesting. It was interesting for me at 19 to go in
and equally, I think that the kind of quantum leap, Adam, was probably jumping from a deputy manager to general manager, because as a deputy, you think, I could do that. I could do his job. I could do it. And then when you realise that it's your neck on the block, it's a completely different ballgame. Yeah. It's a completely different ballgame, and there is a chasm between being number 2 and being number 1, because ultimately you don't have that level of responsibility, and you don't have to deal. You spend an awful lot of time as a general manager shielding your team from stuff they don't need to know. Yeah. So it's a dark art in terms of what information is absolutely relevant to your team and what needs to be filtered out.
Yeah. So we won't talk too much about say the bar manager, but I was going to say how did you find the leap then going from say number 2 to number 1 and having that general manager title above your head?
I've never dwelled too much on titles, Adam, to be honest with you.
Or the responsibility, should we say?
Yeah, I think my first general manager's position was the Crown Hotel at Wetherall, which was a smaller unit, very, very closely knit. And the structure there was such that I was working certainly 5.5 to 6 days a week, but you were on shift. Yeah. Yeah, so you weren't, not like the North Lakes where it's kind of Monday to Friday and then come in to have a look at the wedding on a Saturday. Yeah. It was very, very different. But there was a camaraderie amongst that team that I've probably never experienced before. It was so tightly knit. Mm-hmm. And so I've always very much viewed myself in my time as a GM as just being another cog that makes the machine work. Because the minute you put yourself on that pedestal, then I think you can start to suffer from delusions of grandeur, but you can put yourself under pressure. And I think that, right, okay, I've got the job title and the responsibility, but really and truly, these are the people that I'm the conductor. Yeah. I'm the conductor, and this is the orchestra, and I'm nothing without them.
So then how would you say your management style has developed over the years? Like say from taking your first position to say now?
I think if I'm being very candid, Adam, I think my style initially will have been, and I get this from my mum, my late mum, being a Yorkshireman, a Yorkshire lady, very black and white, and borderline autocratic. And I think that's changed fundamentally. Having been through a couple of psychological profiling programs, 3 different companies, but they've all told me the same thing. I can recognize traits within my personality and my management style that help me address that. So instead of telling, I've become far more collaborative.
Yeah.
And, I can feel myself. Historically, I guess I've probably been prone to, I've never been a micromanager, but been very black and white about issues and saying, well, it's not my way or the highway. But, I think the more collaboration you get from your team, the more ownership they put into situations and the management of your business. And I think that's fundamentally changed over the years. And certainly having gone through qualifications with the Business Coaching Academy, it's more about listening. Yeah. So there was a quote I heard the other day, which I just thought, it's do not listen with the intent to reply, but the intent to understand.
It's a good quote. I love a good quote, yeah.
And it's absolutely true.
That's so true, isn't it?
It's absolutely true.
Something you may not think, but when you hear it, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So then another thing I was going to ask was, say, when you went into, say, the general manager's position, or you're in a general manager's position now, maybe back when you first started or now, what was like the first thing that you would try and improve? Say if you go into that role, would you be thinking, I need to improve, I don't know, the guest satisfaction or the quality of the food or the bedrooms or something like that? What was your...
Yeah, I think whenever I've taken over properties, you never go in with an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Never go in with an agenda, because inevitably your team will resent that. Because if you go in and start blowing to pieces what they've been doing for the last 3, 5, 8 years, you've lost your team. So never make any changes in the first 3 months. Observation. Yeah. It's all about observation. Get to know your staff, get to know your customers, and then start the thing. And everybody, I suppose as a GM, it's a 2-pronged attack, isn't it? You've got to deliver the standards and you've got to deliver the profit.
Yeah.
And that, in a nutshell, that's it. And that's what, unfortunately, that's what you're measured on. They're the 2 benchmarks. If you're delivering the sales and you're not delivering the profit, you're in a mess. And if your standards are not where they need to be, you're in a mess. So yeah. I suppose in a way that's kind of not rocket science, but it's all managing all the different groups of people to help you achieve that end result.
Yeah, like you say, being the conductor.
Yeah.
So then go back to maybe like the North Lakes. So then when you're there 30 years as general manager?
No. So I left the North Lakes in 99, managed the Crown for a couple of years, went back to the North Lakes very briefly before I was as general manager, before I was whisked off to Solent. Did 8 years down on the South Coast, back to the North Lakes in 2008. So I did 2008 till 11 years.
11 years, yeah.
11 years as general manager.
So anyone who doesn't know, North Lakes is a hotel and 4-star hotel and spa, isn't it? So managing that, I'd imagine would be completely different to just like a normal hotel. So what kind of like characteristics or skills would you say that sets you apart managing, say, a hotel and spa rather than just a hotel? What did you learn? Was it the different departments, or is it more people? Or
I think broadly, Adam, the principles are very much the same. Whether you're running a 50-bedroom hotel or a 150-bedroom hotel, it's all just about economies of scale.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is about your team, the volume of people. How many staff would I have had on the books at the Crown? 60. At North Lakes, 140. Solent, probably 160. When I did my regional role, I had another 6 inns of character under my responsibility. Each of those will have had 40 staff. So I suppose at that point in time, I was probably responsible, 460s, 243, neck end of 400 employees reliant on their mortgage as a result of me. Does that prey on your mind? You can't. I suppose, it's a responsibility, but does it stop you sleeping? You can't. Can't let it.
I was going to say, how did you manage then having such a large, like say, portfolio of properties to manage when you first took that on? I imagine that was
the regional role.
Yeah,
it's too much. I enjoyed. So was it too much? It was at the detriment of the North Lakes. So the additional inns of character would occupy my time to a point that the focus was not where it needed to be on the primary profit driver. So you then, if I were to look back now, whilst I love jumping in my car and jetting off around the county and, running operations meetings with these inns managers, great. But the impact when the inns of character were given back to Thwaite, the impact on the North Lakes was almost immediate in terms of an improvement in sales and profit.
Yeah. I always say to people, like, if you're trying to do too many things at once, say if you're trying to do 5 things and get to one goal, you've got 20% energy, haven't you?
Yeah.
If you're doing, say, a few things, you're going to get there far quicker.
Well, a prime example of that was when I ran the Solent Hotel down in Hampshire, and it had an on-site pub, the Parsons Collar. Did you ever go there, Adam?
No.
Right. And so the Solent would turn over £135,000 a week. The Parsons Collar would turn over 25. And the Parsons Collar would occupy 40 to 40. It was such a pain. It would occupy 40 to 45% of my time. Yeah. Now, just put that in perspective of the 2 different revenue streams. It was just mad.
Yeah.
Mad.
So then after North Lakes and that came to the end, you moved on to Leicester.
Yeah, I was headhunted, which was fabulous for my ego. I was approached by the chief exec and the culinary director who were looking for an on-site manager and to have, because the head office is in Gosforth in Newcastle. Okay. So they'd never had a general manager on the site near Cockermouth. And they like me, I like them. They were prepared to pay the money. And I just thought, do you know what, in my early 50s, if I'm not going to do this now, I'm going to be a general manager of a 4-star property until I retire. And if I don't do it, I'm never going to do it. And so, I jumped ship and fabulous company. 3 months into getting my teeth into that role, COVID hit. And so then it was just kind of a roller coaster in terms of closing down the visitor attraction, reopening it back up, so on and so forth. And the landscape at the end of all that was very different to the one that I was employed to do. At which point, I'm a big boy. I understand the economics of things, and I was just a fabulously expensive resource for what I was ending up being employed to do. So they unfortunately made me redundant, and I understand exactly why. So there's no acrimony there whatsoever. But that then forced me to think, well, what do I really want to do with my life? And do I want to jump back into 4-star full service corporate hotel management, or I'd steered a number of ships through very stormy waters in my time as a GM. Done some business coaching with the Business Coaching Academy, and I thought, you know what, maybe I've got some expertise to offer, and set myself up as a consultant. And by luck or judgment, I've managed to land a couple of contracts, working with a local restaurateur, doing some coaching, working with a local accountancy firm. They're building a head office in Carlisle, so helping them with all the food and beverage. And then the big one was Farnham Hall Hotel and Restaurant, which has been an 18-month voyage of discovery.
So then, taking that leap then, had you always wanted to be self-employed? Did that ever crossed your mind? No. That was purely as a point. When we talk about being glass half full, you can look at that. Okay, well, this has happened to me. I can either wallow in self-pity, or I can look at the positives. And, I had no particular desire to go back into the 4-star hotel market, working 60 odd hours a week, walking around the restaurant at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, checking if everybody's steak's perfectly cooked. I suppose like sometimes the stars kind of align, don't they? It's just the right time. To take that leap. Yeah. So then, for being self-employed in the first time in your life, what was the feeling like? Was it excitement? Was it maybe a bit apprehensive, or how?
Very apprehensive, because you've got to, inevitably, when you're employed, you've got a comfort blanket. So you've always got that safety net. You're going to get paid at the end of the month. Yeah. So the concern, I suppose, is making sure that revenue's coming in. But the best bit is having no boss. And with the best will in the world, I've had some good, bad, and indifferent bosses. But I think there's been an element with most of them that they've micromanaged, and I've always found that suffocating. Yeah. And I'll never do it. My time at the distillery was fantastic, but my chief exec would be on the phone to me every single day. And paying me the kind of money in the package that I was getting, I'm thinking, okay, you're not extracting an ounce of value out of me here because you could come and do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So then when you went self-employed, you branded yourself, what was it, a business consultant, hospitality consultant, or how were you kind of selling yourself or marketing yourself?
Almost as a two-pronged attack, Adam, almost like a troubleshooter, fresh pair of eyes on your business. So, you might have a particular issue that you want us to look at, but equally it's that the business coaching thing, it's the thing that really kind of turns me on in terms of just sitting down and helping people to learn rather than teaching them.
Yeah.
And it's more about...
That's the point of a coach, isn't it? It's to coach them to be able to do it by themselves.
Absolutely. So it's about listening. It's about questioning. It's not about telling. And I love that. And, certainly my time with James Hill from Lounge on the Green in Carlisle, who's, a fabulous chef. James actually started for me as a 16-year-old at the Crown at Wetherell. And, and he ended up working for Gordon Ramsay Group. Oh. The boy can cook. Yeah. But what he needed to do was with 3 restaurants in Carlisle, was to get away from being on the stove and becoming a managing director. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get involved in the kitchen, but he was guilty of feeling that he'd not done a decent day's work unless he had his whites on.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And I won't say job's done, but, our monthly sessions are of massive value to him. And I enjoy just going and chewing the cud. Yeah. And ultimately, I think I want to develop more of that rather than troubleshooting people's businesses.
Yeah. So you say about the business coaching that really turns you on, then what kind of sparks that within you? Because like you say, you've been in the industry for so long.
Yeah.
And imagine you've pretty much seen and done within reason. But what excites you about that in particular now?
I think it's about when you're discussing things with people, and you inevitably you've got an opinion and you've probably got the solution, but you want that light to switch on themselves. Yeah. So when you're sat having a conversation and all of a sudden you can see it, they click, and you're thinking, right, okay, we're on it now. And then it becomes an easy journey. But once that person believes that they've delivered the solution, it's not a difficult ride.
Yeah. I suppose, it must be difficult for some people, like say if they're in the business all the time and then you come in and you say, if you were to say do this, and they don't understand why or how to do it, because they're in the business all the time and you come in as a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah.
You can see it from the macro perspective.
Absolutely.
The micro perspective. You say, then when they understand it, they think, but that does make a lot of sense.
And it's the way you question, Adam. The why is a very aggressive question. You should never use why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And I try and stop myself doing it at home.
I love saying why on the podcast.
Why is that? Why is that like that? Why is that there? It is kind of in your face, so it is about, okay, well, what's making you think that way? It's just trying to get them to approach things because why can make people very defensive. Yeah. And the minute that barrier's up, you've lost. So if that barrier comes up in a coaching session, it's quite difficult to knock it back down and get where you want to be.
Yeah.
So you've got to be very careful about how you phrase things.
Saying why are you doing something rather than using are you doing it like this because is a better way to phrase something than
what's making you do it that way.
Yeah. I say it's just in the word then, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're gonna get the same answer regardless.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's just when you're on the defensive, you're always
it's been critical there.
Yeah, exactly. So then over the last couple of years then, becoming consultant and coach, how would you say that's helped you develop personally and in your business?
Really good question, Adam. I don't know. I think I've been very wrapped up in Farnham Hall. There were so many bits of the jigsaw to put together that I suppose in terms of my development with Farnham, the relationship with the owners needs managed. It doesn't help that they're the other side of the Atlantic and there's an 8-hour time difference. It doesn't help that they are not hoteliers and they've got very strong opinions about how the place should be run. that can be a frustration. In terms of my own development, Adam, I think coming towards the end of this contract with Farlam, I've actually signed myself up for some additional coaching myself. So I've signed up for 2 more programs with a business coaching academy that will give me a professional qualification as opposed to being Institute of Leadership Management certified. So at the minute I'm a certified business coach, but by the time I get these 2 more programs out the way, I'll end up with a recognized professional coaching qualification, which is great. And I think I've probably recognized that in order for me to push the coaching side of things to the extent that I want, then that investment in my development is absolutely prudent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely important, isn't it, to invest in yourself?
Yeah.
People may always think that, it's thousands of pounds, but it will pay back in the long run. There's no point trying to cut corners.
Absolutely.
For the long term.
Yeah.
So then, what is next then for you? Like I say, the new year.
So the new year. I've still got a couple of small clients. I'm now starting to tout for new contracts out of. I've not had the necessity to do it, but I was always my intention to get a website up promoting my consultancy, my background, what I can do for people. That's imminent, along with the social platforms to support that. And the new year will start to see me push that quite vigorously, and we shall see where we get to.
Nice, 2023, big year.
It's one of those, isn't it? You know, as I say, if I end up sort of 3, 4, 6 months without replacing the income that I've got from my contract with Farlam, then, you know, it'll be easy for me to do something part-time to fill the hours. But the ultimate goal of, you know, continuing with this consultancy and coaching will remain. Yeah, for sure.
Time, isn't it?
I'll deliver for Amazon if need be, Adam.
Might as well. So then the next stage of the podcast is biggest regret or biggest mistake. So if that's in your personal life or your business life, are you going to do personal, business, or both, or what's in the notes?
Personal life, my biggest regret was doing what my youngest son did through school and just coasting. If I'd applied, I know fine well that if I'd applied myself, but, you know, would things have turned out differently? Maybe, Adam, I don't know. So maybe it shouldn't be a regret. But yeah, I think, and I always used to say this to the boys, you need to try hard at school. You know, you really need to apply yourself. Well, you did all right. Yeah, but I might not have done.
Yeah.
Because it's about that self-application. So I suppose, my biggest regret was probably not messing around so much when I did my A-levels.
Yeah. I suppose it's like you say that, you maybe wish you did a bit better, but you wouldn't be, like, say, in the position you're at today. And
I wouldn't have had the same journey. That is for sure. Biggest regret in professional life, I think there was a time as a relatively fresh general manager, you know, and I talked earlier about empowering your team and trust. Trust is a massive, massive thing, but trust needs to be warranted. And, you know, there have been occasions, particularly at Solent, where I'd just trusted people to do the job and they weren't doing it. And then, you know, when I found out that things hadn't happened, we were way too far down the line. And I could give you an example about going into a budget session where our weddings on the books for the following year were nowhere near where they needed to be. And nobody had told me. And that just made me feel incompetent. And, you know, so my lesson there was, I should have been on top of that because I should have been asking the questions. But, you know, was that a level of micromanagement? Perhaps. But at which point was there not a responsibility on the part of the conference office manager on £28,000 a year to be coming down to me and saying, Anthony, I'm really concerned about weddings next year. We need to be doing something different.
Yeah. Works both ways.
It works both ways. And I suppose, my only really regret big regret in professional life was probably trusting one or two individuals who probably didn't warrant that level of trust.
How would you manage that then moving forward? How have you managed that moving forward?
I think there are that's probably not specifically forensic ways of knowing that information without micromanaging. So yeah, there was a learning. You know, that was in my very early days at Solent, where the wedding market was massive. Yeah. Whereas at the North Lakes, you know, they'd probably only do a dozen weddings a year, as opposed to 45 to 50
Yeah.
at Solent, where it was a big thing. And so, yeah, I think it was a lesson in proactivity on my part, but equally, again, my operations manager, at that time on 38K, he should have known.
Yeah.
And to sit in a budget meeting and the pair of us just going purple.
No idea.
It's not, no, it wasn't good. And it's a lesson learned and a lesson that you never repeat, but it doesn't make you a micromanager. There's different ways of approaching it. But yeah, I suppose that's trust.
Yeah. Trust is a big thing, isn't it?
Trust is a big thing.
So cool. That's pretty much it for the podcast. Have you enjoyed that?
Yeah, I've enjoyed that, Adam.
Yeah.
I don't know where the time's gone.
I know it's been over an hour now. So, any closing thoughts or anything you wanted to say?
Hey, not particularly, Adam. I've enjoyed that discussion for the last hour or so.
Yeah.
Been interesting. You've not hit me with anything too taxing.
Yeah, no, I said it was an easy conversation. And do you want to tell everyone, have you got a website link already? It's going to go out in January. And stuff.
Yeah, it's not live yet, but the website will be AWP Consultancy. It's www.awpconsultancy.co.uk, and I'll be live on AWP Consultancy at Instagram and Facebook, but it will link to my own Anthony Penny LinkedIn account, so people can contact me through that.
Perfect. Right, everyone, thank you very much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like the video if you like the video, comment your favourite part and any future guests. If you listen on Spotify or Apple, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a 5-star review. And we'll see you next time. All right.